a quick, oh my. We're going to start with a quick market update just to give you guys a quick idea what's going on out there in the real estate market. What we're seeing right now is it's still a good market. It's hot out there. We are seeing a little breakup, a little slowdown slightly on the lower end markets. People are getting into contract a lot more quickly. We're getting some closing costs paid and things like that. So it is a good time to get out there and get your clients in. It's still tough, don't get me wrong. I mean, we are seeing some multiple offers still and things like that, especially in the higher end market, up in the $1 million range. I don't know. These people have so much money, they don't know what to do with, so they just spend it on houses, I guess. But it just seems like it's a good opportunity out there for a lot of our buyers where they're getting pre-approved and getting into contract a lot quicker. So that's good news. The big thing though right now is interest rates. Interest rates are on the rise. We've raised up from about 2.875 around maybe 6 weeks ago to right now we're pushing up closer to like 3.25, 3.125. The big news is the Federal Reserve is going to start pulling out of buying mortgage-backed securities and long-term treasuries. When I say that, what I mean is the Federal Reserve has been basically artificially keeping interest rates low by spending about $40 to $60 billion a month. They're basically printing all this money, buying mortgage-backed securities to keep interest rates ultra low to stimulate the economy. Well, now they feel like we're coming out of COVID, people are going back to work, a lot of the assistance have expired. And so they're deciding that they're going to start pulling money away from that to the tune of about 10 to $15 billion a month. They'll start reducing their purchases starting, we're thinking November, it might be as late as January. So by June or July of next year, you could potentially see rates in the 3.5% to 4% range. So just keep an eye on that. If you're thinking about buying, you've been sitting on the fence, or if you got clients, you're a realtor and you got clients sitting on the fence, you know, even though the market is tough and there's not a ton of inventory, it's still ideal to get out there and try to take advantage of these super low rates. The other big thing that's pinging rates is inflation. You guys have heard about it. The cost of goods are going up. When inflation goes up, fixed rate securities like bonds and mortgage-backed securities, they have no choice. In order for them to be competitive, they have to raise their yields in order to be competitive, which means rates go up. So inflation is also an arch enemy of bonds. We got two things hitting us on the interest rate standard. So I feel strongly that by the middle of next year to the end of next year, you're going to see rates in that higher threes, potentially even lower fours. The good news is we're projecting next year, 22, to be an amazing real estate year. They're looking at a 9% increase nationwide on real estate next year as the market kind of settles down a little bit. So I feel like we're going to be in a great market. So it is a great opportunity to still be looking at real estate. With that said, this market has been crazy the last year and a half, 2 years, you know, through COVID and dealing with the most hottest real estate market that I've ever experienced in 28 years. There's a lot of craziness going out there. And I feel like our speaker that we brought in today, Kristen, who's been with us before, has brought this psychology of money to us in a perfect time. I mean, people are crazy about their money, and we learn a lot of this, you know, from our history, from our parents. I mean, my parents wanted to pay off their house, and I'm in the opposite mindset. Like, I'm never paying off my house. Why would I try to do that? So I'm super excited to bring Kristen here today to talk to you guys about the psychology of money and hopefully learn some insight on how we are all a little bit crazy with our finances. All right, Kristen, tell us more about you so we can introduce everyone to how great you are, and then let's get started.
All right. Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me. This is such a fun topic, and I think I want to retitle it as how we're crazy about money or something about along those lines. It's interesting for me because my background is originally in the mortgage industry. Kind of. I grew up in the space. My dad owned a mortgage company when I was young. So I grew up hearing all the stories about people buying homes, and it was just it was a part of my life. But as I got older, I became a social worker. It's my first part of my career. And I worked primarily in underserved communities, doing a lot of financial education and housing coordination. And I saw a huge gap in those markets, obviously, between financial services and some of the underserved markets. So I started a company called Cultural Outreach. And I just sold that company after 10 years of running it, just sold it last December. And the whole idea was kind of bridging that gap. But as I started down that road, I realized that many people in my generation, millennials really didn't know very much about home buying. And I think, it's probably the case across generations, but I really honed in on helping to fill that gap with education and resources that I provided primarily to mortgage companies and banks, and helping them better connect with the first-time homebuyer market. And since then, I've done some presentations and outreach directly to this market, but I'm really excited about sharing from my the research that I've done. I've surveyed thousands of next-gen homebuyers at this point, and interviewed hundreds. And then I personally have gone through the home buying process a couple of times. The most recent one was in Los Angeles, which was very different than when I bought, I think I bought it 10 years ago in Oklahoma, and very different market. And it was extremely emotional. And so it was really cool for me to realize some of the things, the trends, and just the things that we have in our minds that we take for granted around financial decisions. So I'm going to talk a lot today about how we make smarter financial decisions and think about our finances through our psychology. So are you ready for me to take it over? All right, cool. I will start sharing my screen. I would love to hear from you guys as I go along, and love for this to be as interactive as possible. So if you have questions come up, drop those in the question box, and or raise your hand or whatever, and or interrupt me, and happy to have a discussion here. So like I mentioned, I've done a lot of research in this area, and I think, it's been pretty interesting to see some of those trends in the next gen home buyer market in particular. And we started a survey kind of study last April. And of course, that was right after the pandemic had hit, and did not see that. No one saw it coming, I think. So we did a follow-up survey in September to kind of gauge where we were, and then thought, let's just keep it going. We did one this year as well. And it's been really interesting to see some of the trends around how people are, thinking about like the fear around the market. And as Jeff was talking about, I mean, the rates have been so low, and a lot of that I think is going to change over the coming years. And so I think, being able to be equipped with the information that you need to make smart decisions for yourself and for your future is really important, especially at this critical time in our history. But if you want to see the research that I've done, you can go to one place that you can download it is at culturaloutreach.com. We have a 2021 Next Gen Homebuyer Report, as well as the 2020 Next Gen Homebuyer Report too. Let's see. Okay, so I'm going to start by talking about the way we think about our money, and then get into how we can kind of change the way we think, or approach it from a different perspective, and then some best practices or just general considerations to keep in mind. So first of all, the way we think about money is not logical. And I think that's something that we have to, I don't know, for me, I think I always assumed that our financial decisions are just in that side of the brain. They're all done logically, and we think reasonably about them. But just like any other behavior in our lives, it is very much rooted in our early experiences and our worldviews and the way that we have experienced the world. And so, the way you spend money is often very emotional. I think constantly about how when I get tired, or I'm emotionally drained, or I'm sad, I make very not logical, very illogical decisions around money. And I was just traveling, I was just speaking at an event in South Carolina, and the night before I was going on kind of a bender of events. It was a lot of events. And then I was really tired. And the night before I am ordering things off of, the Instagram ads that I literally don't even know what I ordered, some kind of vitamin that's going to make me feel great, apparently. And then I book a cabin in the woods for the next weekend because I think that's going to make me feel better. Anyway, all of these things are not things that I necessarily am thinking super clearly about, but I'm definitely spending my money there. And when it comes to home buying in particular, the biggest financial decision of your life, you really want to be able to see things from a clear perspective. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about some of our existing mindset, I think, challenges or barriers that we have very often as a generation. May not be across the board, but some things that we've seen pretty consistently in our research. And then we can talk about how we make some of those shifts or recognize those within ourselves as well. And yes, Jalen, we've got retail therapy. I am really big on retail therapy. So the first mindset challenge is in our generation in particular is around education. 1 in 4 said that their biggest challenge while buying a home was a lack of understanding. And I think that no matter how educated you are in any area, I mean, when it comes to home buying, there's a lot of stress, and in our education level never seems to be quite enough. I mean, I am licensed as a loan officer because I was working on a project where I needed to be licensed, but I've never actually originated loans, but I should know enough. I've taken the test and passed it, So, but then when it came to me buying a home, I still felt so much anxiety around just understanding what was happening in the process. And I just want to put at least all of our borrowers or consumers on the line at ease, and just want you to know everyone feels this way. A lot of people, and a quarter of the people, said that it was their biggest challenge. And for our real estate agents on the line, just know that this is one of the biggest challenges that people have in starting their home buying process. And as consumers, we want to feel empowered through this process and feel that we're educated. And that's why it's so important to have people that you trust in your life to be able to help educate you and help fill in that lack of understanding throughout the process. So one thing I wanted to mention, actually, before I get into that, one thing that I think is really interesting is thinking about what are your earliest memories around money, and how that plays out in your life. So I want you guys to all sit here for a second and just think about what are the earliest memories you have around money. And so that might be, your parents fighting about the bills at the end of the month, or it might be I always like to have a lemonade stand and would sell things on the street. And that was, part of my entrepreneurial spirit that I think I grew into. And having parents in the mortgage industry, everything was up and down for us. So we had tuna casserole every night for 5 nights in a row, and then we could buy whatever toy I wanted the next day. So that was a very common experience. And of course, that has played out in my life where I've reacted to that with having a lot of anxiety around money. It doesn't matter how much money I have in my bank account. I just stress so much about actually looking at it. And I feel like I'm more comfortable over here on this roller coaster. And so I think it's helpful if you think, though. I had there's an advisor, my grad school advisor was really into kind of understanding the psychology of our behavior. And she says that by the time you're 12, your financial habits are pretty well set. And that's before we've ever actually had any financial habits, but that's because of how much our early years really shape who we are. And one of the really interesting insights from our time with or the research that we did was that in 2020, and I haven't done the analysis yet on gender for 2021, but in 2020, we found a huge gender gap in our generation. And this was so surprising to me because we found that, let's see if you can see here, Yeah, so we found that from every area, non-retirement investing, savings, retirement investing, all across the board, men were outperforming women in a pretty significant way. And I thought, okay, what's going on here? We controlled for everything we possibly could, whether they had whether they had children, their income, their socioeconomic status, their parents' socioeconomic status. And we tried to think of everything. And the only thing that was statistically significant in our research here that made a difference was whether or not they learned about creating a financial plan as a child. And so I bring this up because this was just so astounding to me, because one, I didn't expect our generation to have much of a gender imbalance when it came to actual, education or financial habits. We're outperforming or, graduating more women with master's degree than men at this point. And there's just a lot that has happened, I think, to reduce the gender gap in our generation. But when it comes to financial habits, that hasn't reduced enough. And I think a lot of that, and what this points to, is, again, the impact of our psychology, the impact of the way that our minds have been shaped to think about money. And so, I think we need to remember think about what is the lens that we use to look at our financial habits. Again, for me, that's just so much anxiety. I think about those early memories of money, and of course it plays out later in life. Of course, when I think about opening my bank account, and so thinking about making a financial plan or a budget or buying a home is like, I'll go with my feeling on this. And it may not be conscious. It may always be a subconscious decision, but it's something that we need to bring into the light and make conscious. And so, especially when it comes to buying a home, I mean, a home is the most emotional purchase you could make in part. It's the biggest purchase, but it's also where you feel your safety and security and you build your life from. And so, in thinking about that, what are some of the influences in your life that may be shaping the way you're approaching this financial decision? It could be, again, like these early influences. It could be your anxiety around money. It could be the passion that you have for having a home, or the type of home that you're looking for. I think that just examining that is very important as you begin this journey. So another influence here, and definitely a challenge, has been in our generation, has been a concern around whether a home would be a good investment. 22% said that they were concerned that their home would not be a good investment. And a lot of that from the interviews I've done with people, they've brought up the financial crisis. And if you think about it, with our generation, we entered adulthood during or right after the financial crisis. So again, of course, that major event would have a big impact on the way that we view the housing market, whether it's even conscious or not. We feel this sense of instability, whereas people that came before us, that in previous generations, they've seen the housing market be stable for many, many years. And a lot of people in the industry, I think, take for granted your knowledge around how many regulations we have in place now to prevent something like that from happening again. But for many consumers who are not in the day-to-day of holding these financial regulations and being aware of them, I think there's still a lot of fear and anxiety around that. And this was one where I was actually really surprised with myself as well. When I started to think about buying a home, it was back in December, and I thought, this just isn't a good place to buy a home. It's LA, how can this market possibly be, this could be a good decision? And that was just purely emotional. And I don't know, maybe influenced by some of my friends and what they would say, and they hadn't bought homes yet. But I finally decided, okay, I need to make a logical decision here. I'm basing that off of what I don't know, because I'm constantly telling everyone about homeownership education, all these things. And then yet, why am I feeling this way? So I did a rent versus own analysis for myself. And I, compare that, I got kind of manic in a spreadsheet and like just spent a lot of time trying to put in every influence I possibly could. What if I invested this in the stock market with a, 8% return versus all these different things. And ultimately I was like, okay, looks like it's a good investment, but I still did not believe it somehow. And so I then had someone with, they had the rent versus own kind of calculator called Mortgage Coach. And I used that and had them do it for me. And then I was like, okay, if I stay in this place for 2 years in a really conservative estimate here, then it makes sense for me to buy. So it was only until I actually saw those numbers in front of me, not only from myself, but from a trusted advisor, that I was able to make the decision. Oh yeah, no, this is the smart decision. And it's absolutely the direction I want to go in. So I think that, it's really important that we recognize these influences. And even for me, again, licensed loan officer, have worked in the industry almost my entire life and still had a lot of these just myths in my head that I didn't even realize were influencing me. But if you take that aside and you say, okay, let me look at the numbers, and with someone that I trust, that changes everything. So I think that's one way to approach this. Another thing to keep in mind here is that over 43% stated COVID-19 had a negative impact on their home buying. We have seen the housing market just absolutely explode over the last couple of years. So I think that, or over the last year. So I think this is interesting to think about, but this has been definitely something a lot of people have been challenged with, especially those who didn't have stable jobs. But as Jeff was saying, a lot of this is stabilizing and a lot of change in that area. So we already talked about what your earliest money memory is, but I think that before I get into the next section here, I want to pause and see if we have any thoughts or questions about what we've talked about so far, and just kind of the general mindset in thinking about your financial decisions around home buying.
Come on, someone's got to have some good feedback. Come on, everybody.
Jeff, I'm curious your thoughts as we're going through these things, and from your perspective, how do you?
My earliest memory of money.
Well, what's your earliest memory of money? We'll start with that.
I mean, my dad made me work for everything that I wanted. So there was a BB gun, like the soft, the rubber bullets BB gun that way back in the day when you were a kid, you wanted that gun or whatever. I mean, I was a kid. And I wanted it. It was like $10. And the only way to get that gun was to earn money. And my dad made me, like, any money he gave me, it was because go shine my shoes, go wash my car, go mow my lawn. And as I grew, you get older, you want more expensive things. So then you're like, okay, I'm going to mow my dad's lawn, but then I'm going to go out and find the neighbors to mow their lawn to make that money to do it, and things like that. I think the difference between men and women, I feel like the kids get treated differently. Like, I don't remember my sister doing anything like that. Like, they just gave her money. Like, it was different that way. Like, I was forced to earn my living basically. And she was more, and I didn't notice this at the time, honestly. Like, I never thought negatively about her from that standpoint, but I never noticed her like doing any chores or anything to make money. And so maybe we had different motivations from that standpoint, but that stuck with me today. Like, I work hard. I got this ingrained work ethic that I got to earn my money and get it, and I got to work hard to get it. And that's just never left me. And that's, I feel like, is what's led me to the success that I've had. The one thing that I will mention though, is I was never a saver until way later in life. Like, I literally learned how to save in 2016. Now, I did the 401k crap, all the stuff you're supposed to do, right? But I never knew how to save. And then in 2016, I started a coaching program that taught me literally how to save, and it changed my life. So I feel like that's something that I'm trying to instill in my daughters. I have 3 girls, and I'm working with them to set up their own financial account. They got savings accounts, and I'm trying to get them into buying stocks and bonds and things like that. And my oldest daughter is in Alabama, and I'm trying to buy, get a rental over there where she can manage it for me, and then, have some girlfriends live with her there, blah, blah, blah. So I'm really pushing my girls to be involved in the financial side of it, because I know how important it is. Like, if I would have started saving when I was 15 or 10 or whatever it was, I mean, honestly, people on this call, I would not be here talking to you. I would be in Maui, or I would be in Tahiti relaxing on the beach. But I started in 2016, and it's had a massive impact on me. Just learning how to save, do a financial budget, which now I'm teaching classes on budgeting and things. I teach my team about budgeting. It's very impactful.
That's awesome. So are you, Jeff, do you do open classes on budgeting and, financial planning?
Yeah, we have a couple 6 steps to financial freedom that talk about the 4 pillars of building wealth, which one of them is buying a house. And then, you have to have a savings account, emergency account, and then you need to buy stocks, and things like that to build wealth. And then, of course, you need your retirement. It's that 4th pillar, buying stocks that usually, outpace the market, including the housing market. That's where you really start to build wealth. That's how the rich get richer type of thing. Mm-hmm. And then that triggers into, how do you get there? Well, you got to budget. You got to break down to the penny of all your expenses, so you know where your money's going. And then you find places where you can pull a little extra and put it into savings. You build up your savings. Then you have enough in savings. Now you buy stocks, and then, so on and so forth. So the problem is we all sit here and whip through life, spending money willy-wally and not knowing where it all goes. And then you sit down and you have a $400 a month Starbucks habit, and you're like, I don't have any money to invest. I spend all my money. But yeah, but dude, you're spending it on coffee when you could go get a coffee maker for 400 and never have to pay,
yeah,
$1 a day.
Yeah. And we don't like to look at that part of ourselves, so I think that it's really interesting how my worlds merged from the social work side to where I am now, because in social work and in any kind of counseling or whatever, you're having to look at a darker side. And a lot of the things that, and I'm about to go into a section here where I encourage you to take this model of really creating a space for yourself that allows you to see with an open light on what your needs are financially. And I think that that's something that I definitely have always struggled with, and saving wasn't necessarily my problem, but it was like not knowing, it's just, I still have random bad spending habits, but it's like this acknowledgement of, here's where I am and here's where I want to go. And I think so many people don't do that. So I encourage all of the consumers on the call to attend one of those classes if you are interested, or really sit down and plan that out for yourself. But I think it's really helpful to have others involved, and doing it alone for me was too emotional, and I think having someone there for accountability and also just to help normalize the experience, it really goes a long way. So we have a few thoughts in here in chat. One question was, tell me about the analysis made when investing in the home or stock market. So I did this really extensive spreadsheet, and I'm happy to share it, but I think probably Jeff and the team has access to some tools. And I don't know if you want to share any around like a rent versus own analysis or something like that. Jeff, do you want to share that with the
we have all those tools. So we have a rent versus buy, so you can kind of see what the advantages of money, over time are, and why it makes more sense typically to rent. Even on these inflated prices, rents right now are going up, but new rents right now on a just came out, and they're going up at a pace of 13 to 16% annually, which is a massive number. And then renewal rents are still going up about 7% annually. So if you think about buying a house, you're locking in that fixed payment on the mortgage. Now, yes, the taxes and insurance go up a little bit each year, but it's not nearly 13 to 16%. It's more like 1 or 2% potentially at the max. So buying a house locks in that payment longer term, and just then you get the growth of the equity and stuff. So it almost always makes more sense that way. Is that kind of where you were looking for information?
Yeah, that's great. And then, yeah, we have some comments about the gender thing. So I do want to be clear that that is not the whole picture. And there's a lot of research showing, you know, I think that there is a lot of research showing a financial gap when it comes to the gender dynamics. And we have, our study has consisted of nearly 3,000 next gen home buyers at this point. And I think that, you know, that's of people of all different ranges, but all people that were either about to buy a home or recently bought a home, and all across the country. But that said, I do think that there's a lot of other factors involved, but we did try to control for every single thing that we could possibly think of, including race and all different things. But one thing we did not look at, which is really interesting that some people are bringing up here in chat, is the order of birth order stuff. So I definitely think that there could be a lot of influences going on around just like anything. Your socioeconomic status as a child is going to impact your behavior and feelings and experiences as you get older. All these different things, your birth order, I'm sure has an impact. I was a first child, and definitely, I think that, you know, some people are talking about having to work a little bit harder being the first child. I think that may be the case, but you know, there's so many other factors there. So one of 9 siblings, someone said, I'm sure that was really interesting. But yeah, I think a lot of you guys are bringing up really good points and things just to consider in the reason that I even brought up the gender study, which we have a whole study you guys can all take a look at if you want to, but is because I think that to find that statistical significance around your early childhood experience is what I want to focus on. And for everyone to be able to examine, you know, we don't think about money in the very like present moment and logically the way that we always want to. We have to take a look at how am I approaching money today? Do I have anxiety around this? Am I looking at every factor that I want to look at? Am I not going to a class or meeting with a trusted advisor for any type of reason? Like, what's holding me back? And all of that in place so that you can achieve the kind of financial goals and home ownership and the dreams that you want to have.
I have a thought about, you know, people worrying about money going into purchasing a home. It's not just about money, period. But it's also about credit, because I know growing up, nobody even ever talked to me about credit whatsoever. And I didn't start learning about that until I was dropped into college. And then I got slammed with all this, all these credit card notifications. And I did wreck my credit a lot in college. I'm like, oh, thanks for all the free money, and went and spent it. And so, you know, that was kind of one of my early adulthood hard lessons that I learned as far as that goes. But it's not, that kind of stuff is not ever brought up in schools. It's not brought up in certain households. Like, you know, my parents would avoid debt collection calls and just ignore the phone. And like, that was something I kind of learned to do too. And then at the same time, I was just like, I got to a certain point where I was like, okay, this isn't obviously working. So then I put my head down and I just confronted everything. And then it was like a lot of self-teaching type of stuff as far as what to do with the money and how to organize my credit and do all that other stuff. And I know when I talk with my buyers and I send them over to Jeff or lenders, you know, they start having those conversations about, okay, we need to do this with your finances to get your credit score up, get you these different rates going on. So that's something that that's a huge thing with everybody, because we're all talking about interest rates going up and down too, and credit is definitely one of those factors.
Yeah, that's such a good point. Really, really great points, Maggie. Yeah, so I think that one thing that I found to be really useful is to just set aside time and make it a ritual where you are you're just for me, every Friday at noon is when I look at my finances. And that way I don't have to make a decision about it and my emotions can't get in the way. It's just in my calendar. That's what I do, but I think doing what you can to say, okay, maybe there needs to be some self-teaching, because we definitely didn't learn about it in school. And I think most of the people, I'm sure, I know that this team, that's hosting this is definitely wants to make a homeownership plan for everyone. I'm sure all the real estate agents on the call do as well. And I think that that's something I encourage a lot as well, is just make a plan no matter what stage of life you're in or when you think you want to buy. Because when you have that plan, you at least know, okay, maybe in 5 years, I want to buy a home. Or if you have, family that is thinking this way, but you need to have your credit in place, and you want to put a lot of those things in order so that you are confident and ready whenever you go into that decision. So I'm going to go through to the next step here, which for the real estate agents on the call and kind of providers in the room here, this is kind of the formula that I encourage people to use in working with customers. Empathy and empowerment is the key to your customer experience. And so I think, and even thinking about it from a consumer perspective, whenever we can empathize with ourselves and feel empowered in our decision-making, this is how we make strong decisions, and not only about home buying, but for the rest of our lives around our finances. So consider the place that you've been, consider the experiences and influences that you have, not as a victimizing kind of thing, but as a shedding a light on some of your decision-making habits, and then add information and access to empowerment. That is where, with those combined, you're going to make really strong decisions for yourself. So I'm going to introduce this model that is based on the trauma-informed care model I used as a social worker. So in the trauma-informed care model, we use these 5 tenets in working particularly with traumatized populations. And it's interesting because as I started doing, I did a lot of consulting engagements where I applied this model in reaching different markets and whatever, and realized that when it comes to money, a lot of us have some fight or flight type of reactions. And so we either are like, all right, yes, we're going in on it and we will fight for our money, or we flight away from the conversations around money like I do. And so helping us get more comfortable with the decision-making process and thinking about home buying or whatever transaction it is, if you think about having these 5 tenets in place, this can help you a lot, whether you're a consumer and you're thinking about how do I set the stage for myself, or you are a real estate agent or provider who you want to think about how you build this customer experience. So number 1 is safety, and I'll go through each of these a little bit more in depth, but 1, safety; 2, transparency; 3, having a sense of choice; 4th, collaboration; and 5th, ultimately leading to empowerment. So in the first stage or tenet, it's not even a stage, all of these are going to overlap, but we'll go through in order. 1 is creating a sense of safety. So if you have a lot of anxiety like I do about money, you need to create that sense of safety around having those conversations. So again, for me, that's setting aside time once a week to look at it. And so I'm not making a decision. I also have a financial advisor now that I meet with on a quarterly basis. And that allows me to feel like, okay, I've got someone I can talk to. And it gives me some kind of accountability because, of course, before every single time I meet with him, I'm frantically trying to do all the homework I said I was going to do beforehand. But it makes you meet your goals. And this is where I think doing that rent versus buy is really helpful to create that sense of safety. I did not feel safe entering the housing market until I did that. And that allowed me to feel really comfortable. Also, there's a lot of information online that you can share. And, for the providers on the call, this is where I think having reviews and that type of stuff is helpful. So transparency is another big factor here in thinking about how you build a transparent experience. I've got some quotes from Next Gen Homebuyers specifically, and they're just talking about how it can be important to feel that they have a sense of understanding of every step in the home buying process. So if you are a buyer, think about what steps, like go through the steps of buying a home and plan those out that can help you feel that sense of safety and also ownership in the process. Third is,
what was that TCA there? Sorry to interrupt you.
yeah, I realize that's an old acronym, but that's basically a loan comparison. So being able to, that's from a product that we use, but it's a loan comparison. So being able to, with transparency, for instance, I initially went through the home buying process with someone who was showing these. I had to choose the loan options for myself, and I thought, again, I know about these loan options, but I felt so overwhelmed. And then whenever I had a loan officer who actually did the comparison with me and showed me those options, then I felt like, okay, I feel totally confident moving forward. But that's where you want to be working with someone that you actually trust. So third is choice. So this is from a provider's perspective, thinking about offering reviews or people or testimonials of people that have worked with you in the past, and from outlining your options together. From a consumer's perspective, it's making sure that you are looking at your choices and being able to work, kind of, it leads into this next one of collaboratively with your providers. So whether you're working with a financial planner in addition, or your loan officer team there, real estate agent, think about who are all of your partners involved, and make sure that you have a alignment with all of them in thinking about that home buying process. But if you as a consumer are owning that and you understand what's happening through that, I think that you feel so much more empowered again through that process. And one thing I'll say is that I think a lot of times, because things can feel confusing, terminologies used that may not be understood, or, it's an overwhelming process. And again, it's emotional what you're buying. But the more that you can be organized and really clearly outline the steps for yourself and make sure that you're pairing that with, or reviewing that with the people that you're working with, your real estate agent, loan officer, that can help you feel so much more at ease going through the process. So I just encourage you guys to use whatever you have available, to, even if it's just a checklist that you are reviewing together, that can help you feel very confident, which ultimately leads to empowerment. So I think, just putting the control in the hands of the consumer, that is so important to ultimately making smart decisions moving forward. So I have a lot of these quotes and the interviews on my YouTube channel or on the Cultural Outreach YouTube channel, but you're welcome to review those, and I can share these after as well. But if you're interested in hearing some of their thoughts, I did a home buying event in Los Angeles where I interviewed a bunch of people that came in and about their home buying experience or thoughts or questions and that type of stuff. So, okay, so now I'm going to walk through just a few considerations to keep in mind. These are just high level, and I would love to open it up for more discussion or questions if you have it. But a few things to consider. One is that there is an increase in first-time homebuyers in the market. I know from personal experience that a lot of, we've got an inventory shortage out there, and it can be a really lengthy process. But I think now more than ever, people of all ages are looking to buy, and definitely millennials who have been said to be in the market, or like hiding behind the scenes, have now decided to buy for the first time, or maybe they're buying again. But I put an offer in on a place that had over 70 offers on it. And it was just it's an exhausting process. And I think one thing to keep in mind is that, this is a journey, and to try to not feel too emotionally tied to every step of the way. So just kind of check in with yourself and say, okay, I'm in this for the journey. You may hit it the first one that you put an offer on, or you may go into the office and realize, like I did, I was ready to buy much faster than I thought I was. so your timeline, you may start out thinking it's going to be really long and it could be really short, but it could go the other direction. So just kind of set the stage for, this is an experience that I'm about to journey into. Another thing to keep in mind, as Jeff was talking about earlier, rates are extremely low, have been extremely artificially low for a while. And that means that, your interest rate is, with your interest rate being really low, you can put less down than what you might expect to do. And I think that this is another area where I had to do a lot of analysis to convince myself I did not need to put 20% down. It was not smart for me to put 20% down, in fact, because I got a faster return by just putting that into the stock market. And so that's where you really want to think about your options and play that out. Because with, if you do less than 20%, you can have mortgage insurance, or there's other loan product options and that kind of stuff available. But a lot of people don't realize that you could put I'm not sure what options you guys have, but it can get really low. And it's something to keep in mind. If you are thinking, I'm just going to wait until I have 20%, rates may be higher by that point. And so this is a good time to consider your options. Third is to make a plan regardless of your timeline. So again, collaborate with your partners, and I would encourage you to share this with others as well, to say, hey, if we, I think everyone should have a plan for homeownership if they think that they ever want to buy a home in their life, because it is a whole process, and you want to feel empowered going into it. And so many people could buy a home right now if they did sit down with the information and at least be able to make a plan there.
That's one of my favorite ones, Kristen, is we're always talking to people that, I'm working on my credit, or I'm saving up money. And I don't think they know what the direction is. Maybe they went online and looked things up, but until they actually speak to somebody in mortgages or real estate, directly, to kind of put together a plan, I feel like they missed the boat. It takes them, twice, 3 times as long to come into that fruition of home ownership, just because they didn't collaborate with the partners like you were talking about earlier. So I feel like anybody out there, that's thinking about buying, when's a good time to start the process? Today, right now, start the process. My lease lasts another 9 months. Who cares? Get it started now and make this plan regardless of your timeline. I mean, this is probably one of my favorite slides so far, is you got to start early and put a plan together, just like budgeting and all those other financial things we were talking about earlier. It's if you don't have a plan, it's going to be that much harder to get there if you ever see it, so love it. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So glad you chimed in with that. Yeah, I do think that even, like I said, for myself, I have so many people I've interviewed have said that if they were thinking about buying a home, when I check in with them over and over, if they haven't actually talked to someone that's a professional, then they're very far back. They're still just kind of easing their way in. So many people, what they do is they start out by looking online, and in fact, this last study that we did, the vast majority of people go to Google first and they do some research, and then they get overwhelmed and they hang back again. And so it's, again, that kind of fight or flight response. They're like, oh, I'm overwhelmed, I'm going to pull back. But if you talk to someone, especially someone that you trust and that is going to help you make a plan, that can help alleviate so much anxiety. And it really helps a lot. So, and then shopping, we found that 67% of millennial homebuyers were not taking advantage of virtual tools. This is particularly relevant in the heat of the pandemic, of course, but I think that there's a lot of tools available for consumers to help you feel empowered as in your finances in general. And I think, I hope that becomes more integrated, because right now you've got a tool for, investing in the stock market, and you've got an app for something else, but it's just, I think there's so much available that can help you feel empowered just in your whole financial picture, that it's helpful to keep that in mind. There's also a lot of really cool home shopping apps. The real estate agents on the line may not like me shouting those out sometimes, but I think that just being able to keep track of homes and like Home Snap. And there's a lot of cool things to be able to help you feel empowered as a consumer. Ultimately, I think the goal here is to really use both sides of your brain whenever you're thinking about buying a home. Use whatever you have available to you, starting with a trusted advisor and things that will help you feel that you have a safe plan moving forward, as well as combining that with the excitement of the whole process. So I'm going to open it up here for any questions. But again, want to just encourage you to rely on the trusted advisors, and so thankful for Jeff and his team and the passion for providing, empowering home buyers today to make smart decisions for their future. So.
Love it. Thank you so much. Does anyone have any questions for Kristen?
Kristen, I'd like to actually start out with talking about those trusted advisors. I feel like just like a lot of us don't really learn how to budget or do taxes or do the stock market growing up. Another thing that we don't learn about is who we should be relying on when we do want to learn these things, outside of your parents or your uncle's cousin's second wife. Who should we be going to?
Yeah, so I think that it's interesting. I feel like you guys probably have a lot of resources available, and I guess I would encourage everyone to always immediately start with talking to your mortgage team and real estate professional to make a plan around buying a home. That's always the best place to start. And then they probably have great referrals for you if you want a financial planner and that kind of stuff. I'm also a really big fan of a group called the Financial Gym. That's who I use for part of my kind of financial planning, but that's who helped me with creating a budget and getting to the point of thinking about buying a home. And it's a super easy, like $80 a month or something thing. And they do a really great job with the planning. But there's lots of tools like that too. Personal Capital is one that I really like, that kind of combines all of the places that you're investing or have money in so that you can see it all in one place. And I don't know if that answers your question, Jalen, but those are a couple of the areas I think are important to think about.
I think just talking to the people around you that you respect or look up to too, finding out who they use to get referrals, and then maybe go to those referrals and get more referrals. But every time you talk to somebody that's a professional or someone that you can collaborate with, through the process, I talk to a wealth advisor, all the time, and I don't invest my money with them, but I think he's a really smart guy. And he asked me questions about the mortgage market and what I see, and I ask him questions of what he sees investing going. So I learn from him. I send people to him because I trust him, even though I don't even invest my own money to him. And he even helped create a investment program for clients that don't have a lot of cash, because I kept complaining to him, like, what's your minimum? And he's like, $500,000. And I'm like, dude, half my clients can't come up with a down payment. How am I supposed to get you any clients with $500,000 to start? And so in doing that and having conversations with them over the last probably 9 or 10 years, he actually created a program for new investors with a minimum investment of $5,000 with a 90-minute consult to give you direction on where to invest, as well as a dashboard, like a online dashboard that they created, like custom in-house, so that you can manage your money. So, talking to other people, learning from them, and then getting a referral to the next person and the next person, you can learn a lot. Just look at it as a learning opportunity, an education from that standpoint. I think you're going to find great people through great people. You know what I'm saying?
Yes. And like you said, always interview them. You don't have to, or just have a conversation with them. You don't have to buy in to anything or I always feel like, oh, now I'm compelled to use them for my services, whatever. No, you don't have to do that. You can talk to them, and it's important to feel, again, that you have a safe and good connection with them to move forward.
And a lot of those people want to share their knowledge with you. Like, I love talking to people.
Yeah.
Like, I'll give all my advice that I can give. And if they don't want to apply with me, that's fine. If I gave them that extra up, in making the decision, a smart decision for them and their family, I mean, that empowers me and empowers them, and it feels good. I mean, and in that interview process, Jalen, you're looking for that though, like someone that's willing to help no matter what is probably someone you can trust that you want to work with. The other person's that like, no, I can't give you that information unless you're actually working with me. Those are people I would run from because they don't probably have your best interest in the mind in the beginning type of thing. So those are the kind of things that I look for when I'm talking to people, is how willing are they to give up their, the education side of it, which I think is super important.
Yeah.
Great question though. Anyone else have some good questions here? All right, guys. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for coming on. Kristen, thank you so much. That was awesome. I took a couple of pages of notes here. I can't wait to share it with my new clients coming in that I have some consults today and give them a little more feedback, a well-rounded too. I love it. So thank you again for your time today. It was awesome information. Everybody on the call, we did record this. We're going to put it in our private Facebook page. So if you'd like to watch it again, reach out to Jalen and she can get you the link. If you're not on our Facebook page, we got a ton of great content in there of recorded past recordings as well that you can't miss or you shouldn't miss. A lot of educational material and things like that as well. So thanks again for everyone being on the call. Kristen, awesome job.
Thank you
All
so
right,
much for
guys.
having me. Nice
Yes.
to meet you.
Happy Tuesday,
Thank you.
everyone.
Thank you all. Thanks, Kristen.